So, speaking of temples, the idea that the separation of church and state was that the state should not interfere in the churches, but the church can actually influence the state. There's the Western concept of separation of church and state. So then, in India, should the government control the Hindu temples in India? And what role should Hindus play in protecting their religious sites?
What's the answer?
No! I just asked the question as it was.
So I will say that since Rome is the fount of all wisdom, okay, so I will say then the state shall not interfere with us. It is consistent with the separation of the temple and the state. 2, see, why did state control of temples start? Again, thoda history chale jate hain. A board of revenue was constituted in the British period, in the Madras presidency, I think under Thomas Munro. There were 2 problems that they wanted to address. You have to realize that post the Protestant Reformation, the Christian identity is significantly informed by the Protestant Reformation and its experience with the Catholic Church. So therefore, they start looking for the same set of villains which are comparable to the Catholic Church villains. So the priests are a problem everywhere. So Protestant Christianity has a specific animus and a special love for 2 religions which are priestly in nature. And that will explain anti-Semitism and anti-Hinduism. They have a problem with Judaism and Hinduism. Because Protestant Reformation has a problem with the existence of a priestly class. Okay? Because Protestant Reformation focused on democratization of religion, and therefore it said that Christianity shall come out of the church and shall become available to everyone. So that is how equality as a concept started gaining traction in the context of religion. Fast forward 500 years down the line, Europe has no sense of identity. Because Protestant Reformation, which was feeding this churn of equality to everyone, came to a point where it destroyed its specialized institutions, and the only brand of Christianity that has managed to keep itself alive is the Eastern division of the Holy Roman Empire, which is the Byzantine Empire, and therefore the Eastern Orthodox Church, Poland, Russia, so on and so forth. Because then they had to divide the Roman Empire into the Western and the Eastern. The Eastern became Byzantine, Constantinople, which we know as Istanbul today. So that's how this whole thing is. You're looking at a situation where Protestant Reformation did 2 things. It called for destruction of ritual, and it called for destruction of the priestly class or the priestly position. The results are in front of you. Now you ask yourself if you can find echoes of the very same situation in Bharat. Because the literature shows that their hatred of the Catholic Church was foisted onto the Brahmin. And they said every institution that is populated by the Brahmin has 2 problems. One is an idol-worshipping heathen. Therefore, the basic assumption is that they don't have scruples, and therefore corruption is the default mode. That's one. Second, since there is a Brahmin and since there is a priestly class, expect both corruption and debauchery. So the Board of Revenue was constituted under the British government in the Madras presidency to take over the temple. Now, the good part is that the British man, at least at the outset, was equally fair or equally unfair. So he decided to take charge of both the temple as well as the mosque. This was until 1863. Now, as usual, a vocal minority gets its way. And therefore, the only institution that remains under the control of the government is the temple. That policy has continued until 2024. So, if you want to talk about temple freedom, you have to address 3 specific issues, in my humble opinion. 1, the bogey of caste will have to be addressed. Because each time I speak of temple freedom, I am constantly told Brahmin domination will be back. Untouchability apparently will be back. Is untouchability observed in the temples of United States? No. Are you all Brahmins? No. So the point is, 1, these are bogies which are as old as the colonial establishment itself. And therefore, every person who's repeating this nonsense is being true to the master that he serves. Whether he sits in Europe or America, it's for people to decide. 2, apart from the caste angle, the second angle is when someone tells me, oh, but the kings of yore also controlled temples. Sure, but they were Hindu kings. And this was a Hindu Rashtra. You can't have it both ways. You can't have the cake and eat it too. That I will take portions of a Hindu Rashtra when it's convenient to me and I'll control your temples. But otherwise I will stand in the way of the creation of a Hindu Rashtra, citing secularism as a bogey or an obstacle. How does that even work? What kind of diabolical mental cognizance, cognitive dissonance it takes for somebody to spew and spout this kind of nonsense? It says that the Vikruti is acutely to be found only in the Hindu mind. It has gone through so many layers of distortion that it needs multiple slaps and truth bombs. So, temple freedom, according to me, is not just about freeing this institution, which is our sacred energy space, which according to me are the energy nodes of Bharat. It is also about unpacking the layers of nonsense in our heads about our own culture. And that is the very same stereotype that our children face in college campuses and school campuses. They are not different at all. It's all connected. It is all connected. Because all they have to do is to throw the caste bomb and your children become defenseless. They don't know what to say. Baat khatam. I'm trying to use this temple freedom movement not as an activist. It's a word that I certainly wish to distance myself from. I'm a practicing advocate who's a practicing Hindu who's trying to combine both parts of my identity, which is that you have to use this as a moment to revisit what you think you know about your community and your history. And this is a learning, teaching moment for us. It so happens that in the Stanford event today, I brought up my much maligned article of a few weeks ago called Caste is a Western Construct. So I was telling people that wasn't the original title. The original title was Caste is a Western construct, so what? Assume for a moment that you still accept that. How does that change the ground reality was the direction in which I wanted to push the conversation. Now Indian Express, being Indian Express, edited the title and simply put it out as Caste is a Western construct, did not even play it back for my review and confirmation before they published the article. And lo and behold, Bernal sales went up. People are like, what is he saying? That caste is invented by the British. Arey, kya ho gaya? What is he saying? Ye to puri tarah se pagal ho gaya hai. I said, Arey bhai, main vakeel hu, so my basic funda is, don't go by the title, go by the content of the document. Whether it's a license or a transfer or an assignment or a hypothecation or a pledge or whatever it is, don't go by what the document claims to say it is. You read the document itself. And so I said, okay, do you understand where does the word caste come from? Okay, theek hai, you just say it comes from Portuguese casta. Baat wahin pe khatam ho jati hai? No. You look at Spanish history and you look at Portuguese history. Caste actually has a race component. No wonder when caste is sought to be equated with racism in this country, that is the history that they hearken back to. Whereas Jati and Varna don't have a race component. So if I speak of Dharma and I say Dharma is not the same as religion, I'll find a lot of people nodding their heads. Correct. I'm applying the very same logic. Then caste is not the same as Varna and Jati. Semantics makes a difference, language makes a difference, because every word has its associated history that it has generated meaning for hundreds of years. So while you want to speak of temple freedom, I would suggest that you also use that as an opportunity to talk about caste. Not caste, Jati and Varna. Because while each of you has put together this brilliant video, because you know that these resolutions are coming back to affect you, and they will affect you in a very real way, there are people sitting in Bharat who call themselves Hindutavadis, who have taken a very clear position that temple freedom is an unachievable goal as long as caste discrimination in temples is not abolished. So while you're trying to shore up the image of Bharat here and the Hindu community here, aag wahin pe lag rahi hai in the mothership. Okay? So the place where this video is most important is not just USA. It has to be shown in Bharat, is what I'm trying to tell you. Because your own home team will kick a self-goal while you're trying to defend and establish your case here. So please make sure that this conversation is taken up on a wider level. There is more depth lent to this conversation and the subject. And that means you take an active interest in humanities and not just the STEM side of livelihood.